In the scorching heat of a Roman valley, hundreds of soldiers march under the weight of their gear, but there is something much more crucial to their survival than their weapons or armor: bread. While we often think of the glories of Rome as conquests and battles, the true strength of its empire lay in the feeding of its soldiers. Wheat, more than just food, was a symbol of discipline and self-sufficiency. In this video, we will explore how the Roman diet, far from being a luxury, was a war strategy, a tool that kept the legionaries on their feet, ready to conquer. If this approach to ancient Rome has surprised you, don't forget to like and subscribe. That way, you won't miss more stories about the hidden secrets behind great empires. The sun burns over a dusty valley. The iron boots strike the ground with a dry, uniform rhythm. Hundreds of men march with sweat dripping down their foreheads, dragging nearly 30 kilos of shield, sword, and armor. Each step is a promise of war. But when they stop, there is no rest. They plant their tools in the ground, dig trenches, set up tents, prepare defenses, and then, finally, when night falls like a stone, they sit down, not to sleep, to grind grain. Yes, before wielding a sword, a Roman soldier ground wheat, because before conquest came bread, before victory, food. In ancient chronicles, heroism is measured in battles, blood, and standards. But if we scratch beneath that glorious surface, we uncover the uncomfortable truth. No legion marched without bread. The foundation of a legionary's diet wasn't meat, wine, or exotic delicacies. It was something simpler, humbler, but infinitely more powerful: wheat, known in Latin as frumentum. Surprised? You should be, because that handful of grains was as important as the spear, as essential as the shield, and more valuable than gold in the middle of the desert. Every Roman legionary from Germania to Egypt carried his own grain, not bread already made, not flour, raw grain, whole, hard. Why? Because bread wasn't meant to be a fleeting luxury. It was meant to be a tool, as durable as its bearer. This raw wheat represented between 60% and 75% of the weight of their rations. More than a nutritional measure, it was a symbol of self-sufficiency. The soldiers carried small portable mills called mola asinaria, with which they ground their daily ration. It was physical, exhausting work. After marching for hours, after setting up camp, the bread still wasn't made. And yet, no one complained, because that bread was the boundary between strength and collapse. The first preparation was the simplest: pulse, a kind of porridge made with ground wheat, water, and sometimes salt. It was cheap, quick, and filling. Next came the flat bread, cooked on hot stones or makeshift braziers, raw inside, toasted outside, a delicacy by comparison. But the king of preparations was the infamous bucellatum, the war biscuit, as hard as stone, baked twice, no oil, no yeast, no mercy. So solid it had to be soaked in wine or water for hours to be chewed. But its value wasn't in flavor. It was in its durability. It could last for weeks without rotting, even in the dampest corners of Europe or the sands of North Africa. It was literally bread designed for war. This is where bread stops being just food. In the Roman army, wheat was a tool of control, an invisible rod with which obedience was measured. Did you make a mistake? Did you disobey orders? Did you fail in your duty? They didn't whip you, they gave you rye. The frumentatum was a feared disciplinary practice. When a soldier was punished, his wheat ration was replaced with rye. At first glance, it may seem insignificant, but in the Roman context it was a brutal humiliation. Rye was rougher, poorer in nutrients, harder to digest. It was food for horses and for soldiers who had lost their honor. There are documented cases where, as part of the punishment, the legionary had to bury his sack of wheat with his own hands and receive a new one of rye under the silent gaze of his cohort. Each bite was a reminder of their lack. Think about this. Every morning when reaching into their ration bag, the legionary knew if they were worthy or not. Food turned into judgment, and that judgment was slowly chewed, with teeth, with pride, with discipline. In that sense, wheat didn't just feed, it shaped character. Now imagine the logistics. Each legion, several thousand men, had to carry enough wheat for weeks of campaigning. And if the convoys were attacked or delayed, the consequences were devastating. The Romans developed such an efficient supply network that even today, military strategists study it: carts, mules, slaves, centuries of logistics. Everything revolved around bread. Without bread, there is no war. Without war, there is no empire. And yet that bread came at a price, not in coins, but in time, sweat, and strategy. Did you know that some military campaigns were planned not around the enemy, but around wheat? Generals decided when to advance based on the ability to supply grain to the troops. The enemies knew this. Attacking wheat convoys was attacking the heart of the legion. But what happened when the wheat ran out? At the Battle of Aroda, for example, the legionaries went 3 weeks without wheat. Only rye. Stories speak of men collapsing, not from wounds, but from the moral pain of being food degraded. And yet they survived. Because in the Roman world, survival wasn't an option. It was a mandate. We've explored bread before the sword, the cornerstone that doesn't appear in statues or coins. But that supported the most legendary conquests of the ancient world. But bread wasn't always enough. What did soldiers do when they needed more than pulse and bucculatum? When the body demanded protein, real energy, and elevated morale? The answer lay in meat. But not just any meat. Hunted, conquered, and ritualized meat. After days of marching, building, fighting, the stomach roars, not from simple hunger, but from need. Wheat porridge is no longer enough. The bucculatum is just a soulless rock. The body demands meat, real energy, reward. And the legionary knows it. They don't fight for bread. They fight to return with a full stomach. In the Roman army, meat wasn't part of the regular diet. It was a prize, a luxury, a celebration. Only in special moments or through effort was it possible to taste it. It was a treasure with nutritional value, yes, but above all, with an immense psychological weight. Eating meat meant victory. It meant belonging. It meant being at the center of Roman strength. And to get it, it wasn't enough to sit and wait. Legionaries went hunting as they hunted enemies, with strategy, coordination, and stealth. Groups of light soldiers at dawn separate from the main column. They advance through the fog, across damp forests or dry hills. They carry no flags. They carry slings, spears, and knives. They hunt for deer, hares, rabbits, wild boars. Not just for the meat, but because hunting itself was military training. It required patience. It required silence. It required moving as one. Exactly what the battle required. Titus, son of Metellus, carved on his funerary stele the scene of a group of veterans hunting deer in Germania. Hunting was not leisure. It was a ceremony. The soldiers did not hunt like villagers. They did it in squads, in formation. They hunted with discipline. When they returned to camp, they did not bring just meat. They brought respect. The meat was delivered to the center of the cohort. There, among braziers and hot stones, soldiers, with improvised cooking skills, cut, seasoned, and cooked. They prepared skewers, steaks, simple stews. The favorite seasoning, garum, a fermented salted fish sauce, and local herbs. The smell filled the air, and with it, something more than appetite was awakened, a sense of belonging. But hunting was not the only source of meat. When the Romans conquered a village, a town, a region, they did not only seek gold, slaves, or territory. They sought livestock, goats, oxen, sheep, and above all, pigs. These animals were requisitioned without hesitation, pushed as mobile columns to the camp. They were not loot. They were mobile food infrastructure. Why the pig? Because it was the perfect animal for war. It grew fast. It was abundant. It could be salted, smoked, dehydrated. Its fat had multiple uses. With pigs they made bacon, rustic sausages, hams, dry pieces for marches, and fat for cooking, even to heat tents. Pliny the Elder mentions that in camps pig fat was used as fuel for night fires. But the meat did not only fill stomachs, it also filled the soul. Before great battles, an ancient rite was performed, the suavetaurilia, or betaurilia, a pig, a sheep, a bull. Taken to an altar adorned with ribbons, they were offered to the gods. The soldiers watched in silence. The sacrifice was solemn, almost theatrical. Then the meat was distributed among the cohorts, each portion marked with the unit's emblem. It was not just food, it was a pact, a seal of unity. Chewing that meat meant promising loyalty not. When a Roman soldier bit into a piece of ritual meat, it didn't just quell hunger. It reminded him why he fought, why he bled, why he endured. The meat became a spiritual bond, and the camp transformed for a few minutes into a family united by fire, iron, and blood. But what if there was no hunt? What if there was no livestock? The Romans knew hunger was the worst enemy. And in critical moments, the meat also disappeared. In long sieges like those of Carthago Nova or Numantia, the troops survived on legumes and rainwater for weeks. A famous story tells how General Philip Thieves, in a critical situation, managed to obtain a shipment of dried figs. That fruit, more than feeding, saved morale. In the harshest campaigns, when supplies were irregular, the commanders knew when to allow meat and when not to. Giving meat before an important battle lifted the spirits, reinforced unity. Denying it in moments of punishment lowered morale. On purpose. Meat was a tool, not just food. In winter camps, when the legions weren't in active combat, they began to raise their own livestock. Archaeological remains of rudimentary stables have been found near the forts. The soldiers cared for sheep, goats, and pigs as part of their logistical duties. They weren't farmers, but they knew that whoever controls the meat controls the war. One night, a recent victory. The soldiers gathered, smoke rising to the sky, pieces of meat sizzling over braziers, faces blackened by soot smile. Laughter mixes with the crunching of bones. A piece of bread soaks in hot pig fat. At that moment, there is no empire, there is no hierarchy, there is only brotherhood. But that brotherhood doesn't last. The march returns, the combat returns, and the rations run out. The body weakens, the soul hardens. How did the legionary survive when meat wasn't an option? How did he stay firm in the mud, in the snow, in the sand, only with plants? The answer isn't in strength, it's in the wisdom of the earth.